Hello friends, welcome back to the channel, or if you are new here, welcome. Although it is very warm here still, I can feel the season starting to change. Children are going back to school, people are falling back into their routine, and I am starting to see more and more of the back to school, what are we making for dinner type of posts. I think this time is such a tricky time for a lot of people, whether they're going back to school or not. I think it is such a tricky time with as much as groceries are these days. So one of my goals is to always keep things very simple, but also very budget friendly. So today I'm going to be sharing a new recipe from a vintage cookbook that I got while I was thrift shopping. I think this recipe is perfect for those busy fall days that we are quickly approaching. It has very minimal ingredients. You can obviously add in more as you're wanting, but it is very budget friendly and it comes together very quick. And while I was digging around and looking through this cookbook for new recipes, I also came across a really great recipe for brownies. I think they make the perfect quantity, but they're so delicious. So they're also very simple, very little ingredients. So I thought I would, on a whim, throw those together too. One thing I am trying to get back in the habit of, especially now that we are trying to get back into the routine of going back to school, I am trying to start waking up earlier. I love waking up ahead of the kids, being able to have that quiet time in the morning to drink my coffee, read, journal, whatever I want to do, but just have that peace and quiet before I wake up the house. So I am starting off with coffee, and although it is not as early as I'm hoping to start getting up, I'm trying to ease back into it. We still have a couple weeks before we start getting into our homeschool routine, but I'm wanting to start early and start getting into that routine. One thing I've realized during my time on YouTube is there seems to be a big divide on making your bed. So I'm curious, are you someone that makes their bed every day? Are you really strict about it? I think for the longest time, I was not very strict on making my bed. And I feel like that was kind of for good reason. So my husband, when we were first married, he worked night shift for like 7 years. And I could not make our bed because he would work, and then the second I would get up was basically when he was getting home in the morning time. And so then he would sleep and get up in the afternoon, like evening time, and go right back to work. So I feel like during that time, I really fell out of the habit of making our bed. And now I think that's why I'm so strict about it. There are very rare mornings that I wake up and I don't make our bed because I feel like it just puts me in a better spot during the day. I don't really know how to really say it, but I feel like it just starts me off on the right foot for the day. And oftentimes, if the bed is made, I don't feel like I want to crawl back into it and take a nap. So that is something that I do, or at least I really try to do every single day. And regardless of the times, a lot of times I will do it first thing in the morning, but I will usually always do it sometime throughout the day. And there's just something about crawling into a nicely made bed at the end of the day. Now, I mentioned that tonight's dinner was super easy. It was budget friendly, comes together very quick. However, if you've been here a while, you know that I absolutely love to complicate things for myself. So that is exactly what I'm doing. Tonight for dinner, I am making what is called stuffed bread. I found this in the vintage cookbook that I am trying to cook through. So I came across this recipe. It has very minimal ingredients. One of the main ingredients is the bread, and they use a loaf of French bread. However, my stores near me, they don't have bakeries, and so coming across a loaf of French bread is not really that easy, and I did not go out of town in order to get like more groceries this weekend. So I've just gotten into the habit of making our own French bread. The recipe I have that I will list down below, it makes 2 loaves of French bread, and it is incredibly easy. So if that is something that you are new to, this is definitely a recipe that you can try out. So I'm getting a jump start on dinner today. I'm allowing myself plenty of time to allow the bread to rise a couple of times before we put it in the oven and start the rest of dinner. Something that I have come to find out a little bit about myself this year in particular, I want to say like this summer, and I might have shared this on a previous video, but something that I have found out about myself is I am a piddler. And I don't know if you're familiar with like the reels online that talk about this, but there's one in particular where the voice is just like, I'm a piddler. Like, I just like to piddle. I be piddling. And I feel like as I keep seeing this, I'm like, I am a piddler. So I feel like all day long, like I get a lot done. I'm constantly doing things around the house and getting into this and that. But I feel like so much so where I'm just like piddling around. I move one thing to another place. I switched out like end tables and pictures, and I just kind of like rearrange things in my house. And one of the ideas that I've been kind of piddling around with lately have been switching out curtains. So I've been doing some of that. I ordered these curtains online and I'm just now opening them, and I was really upset about this, partly because I was so excited about these curtains, but I got these online. They came late and they were such terrible quality. So they're incredibly pixelated. To where I feel like you could not see the design very well. And I'm showing you right there that I bought 2 different sets of them. One was a longer set and one was a shorter set. However, they were the same exact design, same colors, everything like that, or at least they were supposed to be. And when I got them in right there, they're completely different. Like the design I think is kind of the same, but they're different colors. Like I said, they're so pixelated that it's hard to even see the design, and the material for them was nothing as advertised. So they came like a very cheap dollar store, like Dollar Tree 125 or whatever we're at for Dollar Tree at this time, but like shower curtain. So I was really unhappy with them. I did want to hang them up here just to see like how the colors worked and stuff like that. So I do plan on switching these out for better quality ones that I was so upset when I got these in. So I took them down. I just wanted them to I wanted to put them up just to kind of see how they would look, but I took them down, and I plan on returning the smaller ones, but the larger ones, I actually am like, you know what, let me try these as shower curtains. So I put one in my bathroom and one in the boys' bathroom, and it actually looks really good with like the paint colors and stuff. And like I said, it feels just like a shower curtain. So anyway, it worked out as far as that, but yeah, I was like so upset when I opened those up, and just the quality of them were so terrible. So I did reach out to the company. We'll see if that gets me anywhere, but I also do plan on returning the shorter ones. I am back in the kitchen. The bread had its first rise, and so I uncovered it. I punched out all the air pockets, and I am just making these into longer loaves, like a French loaf. I'm pinching the seams together, and then I'm going to put them onto a tray that I line with parchment paper, and then I'll cut them, and they're going to sit aside for their second rise. As I mentioned, this recipe, it makes 2 loaves, so I am making the 2 loaves. I do think that the stuffed bread recipe makes more than what the recipe actually calls for. So it was just like 1 loaf of French bread. However, I was able to do 1.5 loaves, and honestly, I stuffed them really full. I think I could get away with stuffing both of them fully, and it would be enough of the stuffing for both of them. However, I wanted to keep at least half of these just plain because my daughter really loves this bread. She loves making sandwiches out of this, so I wanted to at least give her half a loaf for that. But if you're making this recipe and you're just buying the French bread, you might want to actually buy 2 loaves because it made enough for 2. The recipe also calls to put greased plastic wrap over top of these loaves while they're doing their second rise. I always just put like oil on the loaves themselves, and then I put a piece of plastic wrap over top, and then I just kind of set them off to the side wherever is nice and warm so they can rise pretty quickly. I don't think it usually takes, maybe not even an hour for them to rise, and they get huge. So definitely use a very large pan because mine get very big. While I was flipping through the pages to find my recipe for dinner, I came across these double chocolate brownies. So here's the recipe that I'm going to be making if you're wanting to try them out yourself. They were super good. I noticed after I put them together that it said that there was like 17 servings or something like that. I don't know how that person is making 17 or whatever it was servings, because this was a small tray of brownies. However, these were delicious, like one of the best brownies I've ever made. It does have like a fudge topping that goes over top, which I feel like you don't have to do. The brownies were delicious by themselves, but my kids absolutely love them. My daughter, she was like, this would be perfect with a scoop of vanilla ice cream, and I definitely agree with her. I think they would be. So I'm putting together those. That was a very quick recipe, and I had everything on hand for them. That is something that I have really liked about this particular book, is they're all older recipes, and they are all ones that have just very simple and very few ingredients. So I have really enjoyed making a lot of these, and a lot of them I can make just very quickly on the fly because I have almost all the ingredients for a lot of them. This is now later in the evening. I'm going to get started on the stuffing for this stuffed bread. The bread is now out of the oven. I'm brushing just some melted butter over top, and then I'm going to set them aside and work on the stuffing. So I showed you the recipe again. If you want to take a screenshot and try this recipe out yourself, I feel like this was a really great recipe. It was really delicious, and I'm trying to kind of figure out what exactly it tasted like, because when I was putting this together, my daughter is like, is that like a sloppy Joe? And it's really not. It's kind of like the consistency of a sloppy Joe, but I want to say it has very similar notes to like a beef stroganoff. So whatever that means, that is like the closest that I can think of to kind of describe what this tastes like. Again, I thought it was a super good recipe because there's very minimal ingredients. My family also really loves beef stroganoff, so that's probably another reason why it went over very well with them. So the recipe calls for a pound of ground beef. However, I know that many of you, along with myself, the ground beef in the store is very expensive right now, so a lot of people have made the switch to like ground chicken or ground turkey because it is a little bit cheaper at the moment. So I do have a lot of that on hand, and so I try kind of making the switches whenever I can. And this recipe, I figured I would be able to make the switch. So on the stove, I have a pound of ground chicken going, and I am dicing up an onion. I'll also dice up a green pepper, and I'll put those in to saute with the meat while it cooks. While that is cooking down, I'm going to start adding in the other ingredients. This is probably the first time I've ever used cream of cheese. I didn't really know that was a thing. So I did add that in, and I felt like I wanted to add in something else. So I did end up adding in a can of cream of mushroom. I feel like you could have just done the cream of mushroom if that's like the flavors you're wanting to do, because you also do add in shredded cheese. So I'm adding in the shredded cheese. It said about a cup, so I added in about a cup, and I'm mixing that all together. Like I said, I was just kind of wanting it a little bit more saucy, and so I added in cream of mushroom, and that's probably what gave it the more stroganoff flavor. But if that is something you're not wanting to add, you definitely don't have to, because it was not in the recipe to begin with. Once I had that all mixed together, I am going to turn off the heat, set it aside, and I'm going to cut into the bread. So the recipe has you cut into the bread. Actually, I don't know if I followed the recipe correctly here, because it seemed a little confusing. So I don't know if that's just me, but I decided to cut the top of the bread off how I am now, and then you're supposed to scoop out the bread. So I'm doing that in like this thicker bottom portion. I'm scooping out the breadcrumbs. You'll want to put those aside, and then you're going to add that back into the mixture that you have on the stove. So the ground beef or ground turkey, whatever you're doing over there, you'll add in these breadcrumbs into that mixture, and then you'll mix it all up and add it back into the bread loaf. Like I said, I'm not sure if I followed the instructions 100% correctly here, because when I was looking at the recipe, I almost felt like it was wanting me to cut the bread differently and like stuff it. I don't know. I was like, I'm going to do this because this is what makes sense. So that is what I did. If another way makes sense to you, go right ahead and do it that other way. I feel like that is the beauty of cooking. You can kind of just do whatever works best for you. So I scooped out all the breadcrumbs. I'm mixing them into this mixture, and then I'm going to put it back into the bread, and I'll put the top on, and it does say to wrap in foil, so I have a piece of foil set off to the side that I'm going to wrap the loaf with. Like I said, I did end up having plenty of this mixture, so I went ahead and I took half of the other loaf and stuffed that as well. Again, covered it with foil, and then we're going to bake it for about 20 minutes. While I'm finishing up here, I did want to give a little bit of an update because I know that many of you guys have been following my videos and wondering about my son. And I've been a little unsure pretty much until about today, so I haven't really wanted to say anything because I haven't been sure up until this point. So he is significantly better. We are on the road to recovery. I mentioned that he had seen multiple doctors last week and they had wondered about several different things. I appreciate you guys so much for checking up on him and praying for him, keeping him in your thoughts, and sharing your different stories with me. That really, I appreciate you guys so much. But he is doing so significantly better. The meds that he got this last time, they ended up working just very slowly. So when we got them, we weren't incredibly sure if it was going to work in the first place because it was just so slow going. But I believe as of today, things are headed in the right direction. And I don't believe at this point in time we'll actually have to be going and seeing a specialist. But anyway, as you saw, that is how dinner turned out. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.